Assalamu alaikum, dear believers.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله نستعينه نستغفره يؤمن به وأجله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى أهله وعلى صحبه أجمعين أما بعد أيها المسلمون قال تعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته وَلَا تُمُوتُونَ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. Dear believers, we always seek Allah. We praise Him. We seek His help, His assistance. Mighty and sublime is He. We bear witness there is no God but Allah, and we bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is His servant and messenger. May the prayers and peace be upon Him, upon His companions, and the righteous all. We greet you, dear believers. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We also open by saying, O ye who believe, have regard for Allah as the ultimate truth, and do not die except in a state of submission. We thank Allah for blessing us to be present for another Jumu'ah prayer. We should never take these days, these hours for granted. The Jumu'ah prayer actually starts the night before. So our spirit should be excited to come out, to be amongst the believers, and to hear a reminder that can benefit our souls. Today our theme is the human soul and its enlightenment. The human soul and its enlightenment. We know we have just completed the month of Ramadan some time ago, but we all should be taking inventory of our accomplishments. We should take inventory how Allah realigned our souls back to our fitrah. We must understand, well, what is the fitrah? What is the nature? What is this original pattern that I'm celebrated at Eid al-Fitr that I'm back to? We must also be watchful of the Shaytan and his influences to unravel that yarn that Allah describes in the Quran that we so tightly compacted during the month. He's back to influence us, to take us away from the path. But Allah gives us a beautiful surah in the Quran that will tie together the night of power, Eid al-Fitr, the creation of the human soul. Listen to what Allah tells us. Bismillah. He says, وَالشَّمْسِ وَدُحَاهَا وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا جَلَّاهَا وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَغْشَاهَا It says, by the sun in its glorious splendor, by the moon as it follows, by the day as it shows up the sun's glory, and by the night as it conceals it. وَالسَّمَاءِ وَمَا بِنَاهَا وَأَرْضٍ وَمَا طَحَاهَا وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَلْوَاهَا فَأَلْحَمَهَا فَجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. And by the fermentation in its wonderful structure, and by the earth as its wide expanse, and by the soul and the proportion and order given to it, in the enlightenment as to its right, as to its wrong, and to its right. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مِنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ قَادَ بِنْ دَسَاهَا كَذَّبَتْ ثَمُودُ بِتَقْوَاهَا وَإِذْ بَعَثَ أَشْقَاهَا. Truly he who succeeds purifies it, and he who fails corrupts it. And the Thamud rejected their prophet through their inordinate wrongdoing. Surah ends, فَقَالَ لَهُمْ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ نَاقَةُ اللَّهِ سُقْيَاهَا فَكَذَبُوهُ فَأَقْرَهُوهَا فَدَمْدَمَ عَلَيْهِمْ رَبُّهُمْ بِذَنبِهِمْ فَسَوَّاهَا وَلَا يَخَافُ عُقْبَاهَا. But the Messenger of Allah said to them, it is the she-camel of Allah, and bar her not from having drink. They rejected him, and they hamstrung her. So their Lord, on the account of their crimes, obliterated the traces and made them equal. And for him, there was no fear of consequence. So Allah gives us this beautiful surah, Surah Shams. And when we first started the surah, we started with Shams. So Allah gives us an oath. He calls our attention to the creation of the sun. And that's powerful because the sun is the most powerful physical element of creation that we see. Yes, we can see the ocean, but that sun is something you're going to see and you need every day for life. After that, Allah gives us 6 more oaths. And grammatically, they're not translated in every Quran as oaths. Sometimes you see the translator just continue along. But the point is, Allah is swearing by something. He's swearing by the creation. He swears by the sun. He swears by the moon. He swears by the earth. And he's doing this to gather our suspense. And we must remember the Quran was a recited book first. It wasn't something that you picked up and read. Those who were receiving the revelation after Muhammad got it from Jibril, they were listening to it. So Allah used a strategy to get your attention. If I were to say, by this masjid, by the day today, by this, by that, I will be getting your attention. And something very powerful will be coming after that. What was powerful that came after that? After Allah got humanity's attention, He says, فَالْحَمَهَا فَجُرَّهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. He says, by then inscribe with enlightenment to what is right and wrong. So the ayah before says, by the soul and its proportion. Allah is swearing by the soul, that the soul has this certain balance in it. The same balance that the creation has, the soul has. That's important. We must take time to think about that. The soul has the same balance that the human creation has. And you can affect some elements in creation, but you can't. There's many that you can't. You can pollute the air. You can do things to alter how things grow out of the ground, but you can't stop the night and the day from changing. What is that telling us? That's telling us, same with your soul. If Allah's swearing by the creation and then telling you about yourself, there's certain things that we cannot do even with our own souls. You can say that you want to be not what you were assigned at birth, but that you're going to be out of balance. You can say that although you look a certain way, that's not who you are, but you're going to be out of balance. But what is this idea of Al-Hamaha? Allah says He inscribed. We got to think about inscribed. He inscribed the soul with fajur and taqwa. And this is saying that this is a human instinct. Allah has placed in you an instinct so that you can discern what is wrong and what is right. An idea of fajur is kind of like the idea of fajr. Fajr is talking about a break. Fajur is talking about, like, think of it as a pipe, and there's a gushing out of a pipe. So Allah is telling us the idea of fajur is that your life should be concerned in certain principles. And when you bust out of that principle, that's fajur. So for me to just smack somebody, that's the fajur. Because that's not the natural pattern that Allah gave me. But He also gives you taqwa, enlightenment. This is powerful because the word taqwa we know is connected to knowledge. This is what we were praying for. This is what we were fasting for. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. We went through a whole month to strengthen our taqwa. But dear believers, we must remind ourselves that every human being, this is placed into the human being. This fajur and taqwa. And in some cases in animals too. But they don't have the same knowledge of it. What's an example? We all may go to a fire, and we may have something in us that says, don't jump in that fire. You don't need revelation to tell you, when you see a burning fire, don't put your arm in there. Something in you would tell you that. But you may have to touch an iron one time and say, you know what, I'm not going to do that again. That's taqwa. Taqwa is the ability to know that something is harmful for you, and sometimes Allah is connecting that to knowledge. So the first point I want to make, dear believers, after Allah has swear by the creation, the idea of taqwa is rooted in knowledge. Allah says, وَتَقْوَى اللَّهِ وَيُعَلِّمُكُمُ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. He says, obey Him and He's teaching you. So every person that comes into existence is given this formula. They're given some knowledge of what is right and some knowledge of what is wrong. But the human beings can oppress that. Your God-given fajur and taqwa, the human family, we can oppress that from each other. You may say, well, brother, how can you oppress it if it's God-given? Because you can restrict an environment for someone to flourish in that. If you take a people and enslave a people and not allow them to think for themselves, do for themselves, create for themselves, they could squander the maximization of what's right and wrong. If I have a garden and I kick my neighbor out of the house and he has no way to eat, I have all the vegetables and all the resources at my house, the next family is starving. That's how you can affect someone's fajur and taqwa, because now that person may have to step out of his nature to eat. May have to step out of his nature to live. So this idea of alhamaha, this idea of the inscribed nature that Allah has given you, He's given it to everybody. But the question is, are we maximizing it? And this is so important because there's evidence that in our history, we were an oppressed people. We have, and this is not just for the African American, there's oppression happening all around the world. And the Quran is the freedom. It is what should free someone up from that. It's not just an imam or a scholar or the sheikh or an ulama that has this built-in knowledge. No one has a patent on Quranic guidance. You can call the U.S. Patent Office. You're not going to find anywhere where it says Quranic guidance has been patented by a certain group of people. It's not like that. Allah says everybody has فَالْحَمَهَا فَجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. You have been inscribed with this understanding of right and wrong. Are you maximizing it? Do you even know it? Or has someone convinced you that you don't have the ability to live up to your potential? So when we go to Surah Shams and we recited this ayat, وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَلْوَاهَا فَأَلْحَمَهَا فَجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا, that is directly connected to the night of power, Eid al-Fitr and Surah Duha. So how is it connected to the night of power? Because we know that the night of power, it was what? Historically, it's the night that the Quran was revealed. But what was that night for human history? It was the night that Allah gave the ingredients of revelation to realign the human family with what Allah wanted. We know there was previous revelation that came, but that night was a night that the Quran began to be revealed and the ingredients for this realignment. That no, you're not God. No, God doesn't come in the form of a man. No, you're not a chosen people. The revelation was the ingredients that came that night that changed human history. It was the enlightenment of the human soul. That was the nourishment that recreated the standard for human excellence and brought the humanity back to their fitrah. So how do we know that? How do we know that the night of power brought the human being back to his fitrah? Allah tells us, He says, Ar-Rahman alam al-Quran khalaqa insan allamahu bayan. The merciful benefactor, He taught the Quran. And in teaching the Quran, He created you to be human and gave you clear speech. So your humanity is substantiated by the Quran. You can't come to your full expression as a human being without revelation. Yes, you could be someone that has another book of scripture. You could be of the people of the book. You could be a good person with good spirituality. But if you want the excellence that Allah has defined a human being with, you must come through the Quran to get that. It reshapes the experience that we had. But what happens after the night? What happens after every night? We have what? We have Fajr, and then we have this idea of Duha. So yeah, the night of power is when the inspiration comes in darkness. This is why we recite the Maghrib and Isha outwardly. Why you ever say, why do we do that? Why do we recite Maghrib and Isha outwardly in Fajr? Because in darkness, you need to hear the revelation of Allah in society. In daytime, you see it demonstrated. You don't need me to recite during Dhuhr and Asr if you see me being excellent in my humanity. But when we're at home in the night, in the darkness, you need to hear that outward reminder of God's excellent revelation. But Duha is not just, it's a period of enlightenment. We know it's a surah in the Quran, and we know it came during a period when a prophet was distressed. Peace and blessing be upon him. He got revelation, it stopped for a while, and then he gets during Duha. But the real question, dear believers, that I want you to think about is this is a Duha as a period for individuals and societies. Have you had your night of power? Have you had a night of inspiration where this book becomes so important to you is life or death? Not have you read the Quran or have you heard it recited. Have you had a true night of power where you're saying from this point forward, this is going to be my navigation system for life? Have you had that night of power? And if you have you had that at Duha? Have you had that enlightenment where you can be bright in society to show this demonstration? This is something we should strive for. If we haven't had that experience, we should be looking for that. And the Duha is not just restricted to, when you think of the Duha, think of it as a period of enlightenment, but it also can be a period where you overcome certain parts of your life. You could be going through a long period of challenges. Allah removes those challenges, and that is your Duha. Now you come out and your spirit is brighter. Your mind is brighter. And we see this happen throughout Islamic history. We've had periods of enlightenment. But again, we went through the whole month of Ramadan and we read this entire book. Did we have a night of power? And we think of night of power as my sins being forgiven and the angels are coming down and having mercy on us. That's true. We all would love to have observed one of the nights and that night be the night that Allah wiped away our slate. That's probably the primary thing. Inshallah, Allah has given that to all of us. But in addition to that, we also want to have a night in our lives where the Quran becomes real to us. And we want that to translate into a period of duha. And if we go back in history, dear believers, we know Islam had a long period of ascension where each community had experienced its own duha, its own enlightenment. And we see this manifested in the schools of thought. We know the Hanafi school established by the students of Abu Hanifa, they flourished in the Iraqi region. They experienced a duha, an explosion of brightness, where they established Islam in a certain way. We know the Maliki school, established after Malik ibn Anas, flourished in Spain and North Africa and had its duha, its moment of enlightenment where it brought guidance of how to apply Islam in that region. Same with the school of Shafi. It had its duha in its certain region that it established. In Hanbali, all the schools of thought had they took this nefsin, so I had this balanced soul with this idea of the fujur and the taqwa, and they had enlightenment where they built civilizations throughout Islam. The question, dear believers, is how did that impact us here in America? What duha are we experiencing? Or have we had our duha in this country? This is something we have to think about. If you're looking at Islamic history and you're seeing Islam ascend with a particular brightness, based on the understanding, based on what Allah put in the human soul, different expressions in business and culture and politics, we saw that throughout the rest of the world. The question is, what are we experiencing now? In fact, I will look at it like this, because some people don't think that those who came into Islam in this country, they don't have this entitlement, this inscribed idea of duha, that we shouldn't have a brightness that comes out of this part of the world. That's not true. That's not even natural. Every teenager at some point wants to express themselves. Human nature. If you could show me a young person that at some point doesn't want you to help him walk, this is a natural product. In the animal life, you see that everybody is struggling for independence. With young people, we see that. So those of us that come to America and say, well, the African-American Muslim community, they don't get to have a duha. That's something's wrong. And let me put it to you in a different way. Because we just finished Ramadan, we had iftar, right? Some of us had iftar every night. So just think about this. If you say the Hanafi school was coming to the global iftar, we know that these schools of thought existed for 1,000 years. And they were bringing this global dish. Let's say the Hanafi came with their shawarma. The Maliki came with their curries. The Shafis came with their tandouris. And the Hanbali came with their lamb. And they're going to this global iftar for hundreds of years, where everybody's bringing their dishes. And these dishes have the spices of culture, expression, business, entertainment. What dish are we bringing in America? You can't come to me and say, no, brother, you got to choose one of the shawarma or the curry, the tandoori, the kebab. You got to choose one of those dishes. No, that's not natural. I should be able to come with that smothered chicken and bean pie. Because if we think about it, you got to have an imagination. If the Muslims, if this country was around in the 8th or 9th century, we probably would have a 5th school. Because somebody would have brought Islam across the Atlantic and given it to the people there. And we would have been bringing that dish. But the global iftar happened for 1,000 years. And maybe throughout some of the period, we were part of the curry group. Because we were in Africa. We were coming with that curry goat or whatever we would have. But then we know in the 16th century, we left that part of the country. We were disconnected from our fathers and our parents. We were uninvited to the global iftar. And no one sent an invitation to us to say, hey, come on back. Where's your dish? Where's your mind? Where's your influence? So now in 1930, we have our night of power. We don't get the full Quran in 1930 in America. The rest of the Muslim world, they've been bringing the same dishes and they got conquered with those dishes. Same shawarma for 600 years ain't gonna cut it. You gotta bring a new dish to compete with Western philosophical influence. And this is, if you go back and study history and say, well, what happened to the rise of the Muslim community? I can simplify it for you. We had the right dishes, but we were making them the same way. We weren't able to, and you weren't able to use this Quran and allow every individual to have their own enlightenment to say, hey, let's read the Quran and make this a little better so we can compete with the influences of the world. You can't just bring the same dish century after century, and then when other people are challenging your way of life, you fold. But in 1930, we got some spices. In the early 30s. Started hearing the word Allah, Muhammad, Islam. We didn't have the full Quran. But in 1975, we got our duha. We came into a period of enlightenment. And I'm not going to get it wrong. There were other Muslims in America who looked like me practicing Islam from 1930 to 1975. But they weren't bringing curry. They were using the same dishes that the rest of the world was bringing. So the question that you have to ask yourself is, does every human being truly have the ability to read this book and bring their own mix to the equation? Or does somebody have a patent on Islam to where you just got to choose one of the dishes? We wouldn't even accept that here. If I invite you to iftar and say, hey, brother, come on out to iftar this week, but 30 nights, you can't bring a dish. Your dish isn't accepted. And dear believers, I'm simplifying an issue that we have in the Muslim world and throughout the country. I'm trying to use a food analogy, but where we're really at, dear believers, and we'll break, is the Muslim world was conquered because they did not meet the technological advances that society had. At some point, the human being was no longer allowed individually to read the Quran and bring new enlightenment to the human family. They stopped that. And we're still in that environment now. Most masajids around the country, they treat you like a consumer. Come to the masjid and the imam who's been trained is going to give you your understanding. Come to the community and we're going to feed you with the great stories of the tafsir. We don't think about the Quran. And why am I saying this? Because you just spent 30 nights reading a book that was supposed to give you, it's asking you, it's challenging you, it's making you a scientific thinker. And then you're supposed to end the book and bring the same dish. No new ideas, no new insight. That's not even, when the law says, wa nafsin wa ma sawaha, that's not balanced. You should have something from the past and something from the future and current, and it should be the same mix. And I'll close and give you an example, because I'm long today. We have Surah Al-Fil. So this is what the argument is that you would hear around the world. This is said quite a bit. They say that, would a person go to a heart, if they have a heart, you have a heart problem, would you take a regular person to do that heart surgery, or would you want to go to a professional expert? And they would say, well, that's the same with the Quran. If you haven't been trained in the sciences of the Quran, then you should have no opinion on the Quran. That's not true. Why is it not true? Because Allah allows anybody to have regular knowledge, but it's the believer that can get huda. You could be a heart surgeon and be a disbeliever, and Allah will allow you to use the creation to help people, but you get nothing in the next life. So the only criteria that there is for this book to get enlightenment is to have taqwa. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. So dear believers, this is a challenging topic, but what we're really trying to say is that we got to know, where are we in the history of humanity? Are we just satisfied with community life where we just come out, recite the Quran, and we're not making a contribution? We're not competing. This is the Quran talks about the struggle against ignorance. So if the Quran was a movie, and Islamic history was a movie, we are reaching the conclusion of these different roles. Now everybody has the ability to use their smartphone and learn tajweed. That didn't exist 1,000 years ago. That didn't exist 25 years ago. We are in a level playing field where all you have to do is have the taqwa and a desire, and you should be able to take this book and compete with anybody in the world. I'm not saying, we're not talking about the legalese issues in the Quran. The Quran has about a third of it that is devoted to legal matters, inheritance, things like you can't just pick up the book and give insight on that. We accept that. But the real question is, when you read Surah Al-Fil, the argument is that you're not trained in what it meant. That may be true. But what is more important? Is it the historical meaning or the practical application? I think it's both. Because not everybody is going to know about the story of Al-Fil. They're not going to know about Abraham. For me, you got people who don't even have access to books and information. So does Allah want that person to only wait for the Imam or Sheikh to give him the tafsir? Or does he want you to at least use the story as guidance? We should take the lesson from Al-Fil and be able to see, what is the lesson? Perseverance, not giving up, having trust in Allah. That's what we need to do. Same with Surah Shams. If you go study the traditional tafsirs of Surah Shams, you're not going to find them discussing, in 2022, people are trying to change gender assignment. When Allah says, wa nafsin wa ma salwaha, that is our response to that issue. Our response is, we stick to the creation as being in complete balance. And the human being is in that same balance. So until the night and the day doesn't switch, we trust that the human being that's created was created perfectly. So we have to take Surah Shams to address the issues that are happening in the environment. We have to take all of the surahs and be able to say, how can we use this surah to help us? And as we get ready to close, if you're saying, well, what's an example? I can share with you, we're still in the pandemic. Somebody had to look in the Quran and find guidance to how to deal with a situation we can't even be together. That created new insight. So the moral of the story to believers and the reminder to you and me is that we've experienced the month of Ramadan. Did you have a night of power? Did you have your duha? And if you didn't, Allah is inviting us for that. He wants you to read this Quran. He says, أَفَلَا يَتَذَكَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ. Have you not thought about this deeply? He wouldn't ask you to think about it and not be able to express it. He wouldn't say, read this book, read all these stories, how I'm challenging your imagination, I'm challenging you with the creation, but you're not qualified to give any insight. We got almost 2 billion Muslims that read the Quran during the month of Ramadan. The U.S. Patent Office should be busy right now. We should have people who have new insight to how to cure the pandemic, new insight to technology, new insight to government, new insight to medicine. But if we are just consumers in our communities and not producers, we're in trouble. So, dear believers, we thank you for listening to this reminder. We went a little long today. I'll go ahead and read the announcements, and then we'll close out. Please continue to make dua for those who are sick and in need. Please continue to make your zakat and sadaqah payments via the website, masjid.shaheed.org. Brothers meeting tomorrow following Fajr, with Mecca meeting immediately following thereafter. Imam Omar Shaheed from Columbia, South Carolina will address the group. Service meets tomorrow at 11 a.m. On Saturday, May 31st, from 10 to 1, Mecca hosts the Mecca Brunch, mentoring boys to men at the Masjid. Donations are welcome and prizes will be awarded. July 22nd through 24th, Masjid Ash-Shaheed and other masajids present the 3rd Annual Brother Summit. Registration is $175 until June 22nd and $200 afterwards. See your email or Imam Ibn Mutakabir for more information. Vows, July 29th through 31st, will host a marriage conference here at the Masjid with several speakers and presentations. Please see your email and more information or contact any Vows member. Masjid Ash-Shaheed congratulates Malcolm Akbar, who graduated today from UNCC with a bachelor's in kinesiology. Aliyah Akbar graduated last Friday from UNCG with a bachelor's in elementary education. We also congratulate all other graduates at whatever level that they are graduating at. Tafsir discussion tomorrow at 2, Talim Sunday at 1:30. Due to Imam staff meeting, we will not have Strong in School. No, that was last week. Sorry about that. Staff meeting this weekend. The Surah Club and Book Club will meet alternating Thursday nights. Jumu'ah next Friday. And I think we have one more announcement. Let me get that for you. We have the American Muslims for Palestine. There's a rally that is happening. It is Sunday, May 15th at 7 p.m., First Ward Park, 301 7th Street, Charlotte, North Carolina. Make yourself seen and heard. Ameen. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanatan wa fi akhirati hasanatan qina adhaban nar. Oh our Lord, grant us the best in this life, the best in the next life, and save us from the punishment of the fire. Ameen. Aqimus salat. Staff meetings at 10 o'clock Sunday.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Hayya ala salah, hayya ala salah, hayya ala falah, hayya ala falah. Qad qamatis salah, qad qamatis salah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah.
La ilaha illallah. Allahu Akbar. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Malik Yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Ihdina sirata mustaqim. Sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim. Ghayru mahdubi alayhim waladdallin. والشمس وضحاها والقمر إذا تلاها والنهار إذا جلاها والليل إذا يغشاها والسماء وما بناها وأرض وما طحاها ونفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها كذب ثمود بتقواها وإذ بعث أشقاها فقال له رسول الله ناقة الله سقياها فكذبه فأكرهوها فدمدم عليهم ربهم بذنبهم فسواها ولا يخاف عقباها. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-sirata mustaqim. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Brother Elijah Kabir Akbar also graduated in business. I think we're going to have a graduation day at some point. We'll keep you posted. We may have something at the Masjid for him.